Okay, Richard, last time we spoke, it was in the thick of the pandemic. You were stuck working from home. I know we talked about this a little bit. You mentioned it's sort of a hybrid situation right now. I'm just curious, at Briggs and Riley, have things normalized?
Well, I guess to the degree that the world you want to call normal, yes, the things have normalized. We've pretty much found a way of operating that is day in and day out functioning well and working well, and we're still trying to find better ways of working, which I guess is standard in any company to always be looking for ways to improve. I don't think too many people 3.5 years ago before COVID ever expected uh, hybrid work or work from home or being in the office part of the time to ever be part of trying to figure out how to maximize the impact and the effectiveness. So we have another area to focus on since COVID to try and maximize how we're effective in what we do. You and I were talking a moment ago about how do you bring the core values and the culture to people that are, started off their job not being in the office. It's one thing when you've been in the office for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you just understood the culture and it was just through osmosis and just part of your being. And then somebody new gets hired and they start off being remote and maybe they only come in the office a couple of days a quarter, or even if they come in 2 days a week or something. How do you make sure to get that culture and those core values instilled in that person, and vice versa, between that new employee and the company? Older employees, it seems like they've already got it in their DNA, but it's the newer employees that it becomes the challenge. But in short answer to your question, things are working very well. Business is doing great, and we're moving forward and continuing to do what we've always done.
That's great. Yeah. It reminds me as you're talking about the culture. So I don't, I don't run a company, I don't manage people, but do you follow like basketball at all? Like Coach K, the Duke basketball coach. Have you
Yeah,
followed
not
him at all?
much. No.
Okay. But he's kind of known, recently retired, coach for, I don't know, 30, 40 years, coach Team USA basketball as well.
Mhm.
Great documentary. A couple of things came out at the same time. One was this Netflix documentary about how he was handpicked to turn the men's USA basketball team around. So many great stories there because he also recruits Kobe Bryant, and
Mhm.
it wasn't as smooth sailing as they expected. And a lot about like culture and things you can sort of mirror with business that went on around that time in that documentary. And around the same time, he came out with a masterclass on leadership. And I was about to cancel my membership, and I watched like the highlight, and then I watched another video, and I said to myself, I've got to finish this thing through. And he had a video on how to develop values of like your team. And you
Mhm.
always hear about that, but
Yeah.
like it's almost like lip service, right? And then he like dug into it further though. He said, okay, like here's how you actually do it. And now you need to define them. And this is these are your guardrails. This is your compass of like how you run your team. And he always did a really good job of, because he knew like most people watching this masterclass are not in sports. They're probably in business in some way, shape, or form. So he always did a really good job of relating it back. And I'm wondering, this really wasn't a question of mine, but I'm curious, as things are somewhat changing, normalizing, um, is there one of those values? I know we talked about like slow and steady last time, but is there sort of a value of the company that comes to mind that you think maybe is has surfaced or is more important over the last few years as you guys have made this transition?
Well, just to clarify, it's smart and steady, not slow and steady.
Did I say slow and steady? Smart and steady. Thank you.
But I think all our core values play play off of each other. So I don't know that there's really one core value that I would say that one stands out more than any of the others. I think, when we hire somebody new, for example, one of the things that we do, the person spends an entire week in the office, and sometimes because they may live far away, instead of letting them, just sit in a hotel room over the weekend, have them go home and maybe come back a few weeks later. So part of the idea is to get a new hire to spend time in the office, even though they may be a remote person that lives on the other side of the country. Part of what happens when they do come in is they meet with all 8 of the vice presidents of each of the different departments. And it's part of their onboarding. So they're spending 45 minutes or so with each of those VPs. And then, and the idea behind that, and myself and the president of the company as well. And really, the idea around that is to make sure that there aren't silos between the different departments. I met with one person a bunch of months ago who said, this is so refreshing to be sitting with you, because in a previous company I worked at, my manager actually said, you have no reason to talk to people in other departments. So, stay focused, do your job, keep your head down, and stay within this department. If somebody needs to be spoken to from a different department, talk to me and I'll do that. And that was, I mean, it sounds so bizarre when you hear it said out loud, but this is actually how that company seemed to feel things should be run. Maybe they felt that that things would get disjointed if it didn't flow through one person in the department, at the head of the department. So part of the reason for that sitting down, and part of what I do when I sit down with any new hire, is really go through all the core values and talk about how important they are. And they're important from the point of view of both recognition for supporting them and reinforcing them, and exhibiting them. And at the same time, they may be, had a conversation with, like, hey, that really wasn't, whatever it takes is one of our core values. Somebody said, or keep your commitments. You said you'd finish that report by Thursday at the end of the day, and you didn't. And you may not have realized what it did was the person was leaving on vacation on Friday, and they needed that report to take with them. So, there's a reason for keeping those commitments, and making sure that you honor them. So all of our core values, sort of work in tandem to make sure that we're all operating with the same sort of guardrails and the same expectations. Because at the end of the day, each of those core values, if you were to pick them apart, what they all add up to, where the sum is greater than the individual parts, is building trust, right? Because it's all about trust. I think any good company really requires that there be trust among the team members. And when you lose that trust, everything, in my mind, things start to, splinter and deteriorate. So I think all those core values really work very much together. Oh,
Oh,
you're
sorry.
muted.
I intentionally mute myself after every question just so you don't
Okay.
have to hear the background kids or anything. It made me think, like, my wife always says, like, don't make promises to the kids that you can't keep, or don't
Yeah.
even say anything you won't do. Right. And nobody at work tells me that, but like when my family is telling me that, I might say things to the kids and they'll keep me accountable more than anybody. So I was just thinking about that. The other thing I thought about is, like, you mentioned all these values that ultimately create trust and a sort of a cohesive culture. As we were talking earlier, it seems like the companies with cohesive culture were the ones who were least exposed, maybe during the cracks of the pandemic, as there were maybe transitions of working from home and things like that. There was this other sort of sports analogy that came to mind. There's these two quarterbacks on a football team right now. One of them held in high regard, high ceiling, very little playing time, and the other one, when you look at the stat sheet, has so one guy has played 3 games, well, the other one has played 55 NFL games and started. And part of that I think of is just experience. Like you're more poised, you're in control of the offense, right? You can withstand the rush and not make short-term decisions. Like someone's gonna, maybe you trust your teammates to come block for you and things like that. You guys have been around for a while. One of the things that your team and I have talked about is I mean, you've been around more than like 30 years in the business from a heritage perspective, but the 30th anniversary of Briggs and Riley, there's so many startups in the luggage space, right? And one of the things you said was we don't need to make iPad covers. I don't know if you do today, but like do a few things and do them really well. Where there are, I'm sure you've seen them and probably studied them, but there's so many other kind of mini startups in the space. But you guys have had so many repetitions and you've been here for so long, where maybe the last few years you didn't panic, right? Like, I mean, am I making sense? Do you feel like just like being around for longer, having more repetitions, to use that sports analogy, has helped you kind of see things more clearly over the last few years?
Yeah, I do. I think wisdom, comes from experience, and you got to keep your cool and your calmness. And when COVID hit, for example, we all got together and we figured out, okay, how are we gonna do this, and how are we gonna maximize uh, the situation and make sure that things hold together. And I was very proud of how we handled it, because we immediately started thinking not just of ourselves and of our business, but what can we do to help what was going on externally. So one of the things, for example, was we put together a retail advisory committee with a bunch of our luggage retailers, and said, okay, let's talk, let's have some brainstorming sessions. And we met every 2 weeks. We would get together with them, and there were about 15 of us on the call. There were about 5 from Briggs and Riley, and 10 or so retailers out there. So, if you keep yourself calm and cool and stick to your mission, and your plans are aligned, and you're not just going in helter-skelter panic mode, then you could get things done. One of the things that came up in our first talk 3 years ago was about I said about flying the plane. Everybody should take flying lessons, and I love aviation. It's one of my passions that I do often. And one of the things you do in aviation, which is so fundamental to so many jobs, is you practice the emergencies. You train for it, and you do the unexpected, because when the unexpected inevitably may just happens, and it could be a big deal, it could be a small deal, but when the unexpected happens, you got to be prepared for it. So, in flying, they say the first thing to do is fly the plane, because you'd be amazed. That sounds so simple, but the truth of the matter is there have been commercial airplanes that have gone down because they got so infatuated with trying to find what the problem was that they ran out of fuel, or they, didn't pay attention the direction they were going, and they may have hit a mountainside or something. Things that sound ridiculous, but what it comes down to is, fly the plane, run the business, and run it with a calm, cool head, and know your priorities, in advance of facing that fire that may come at you, right? They do it in all kinds of areas, whether it's the military, whether it's aviation. Um, you apply those lessons in business, and you don't panic when things start going off the rails.
It reminds me of the Checklist Manifesto, that book by Atul Gawande, where he talks about, like, I'm sure you know, like there's like some kind of checklist, right? When you're flying, you
Mm-hmm.
when things are going south, like you go through that checklist that is probably
Right.
somewhere in the airplane, right? That you can easily
Yep.
access.
Yeah, that's the first thing you pull out when you pull it out all the time, whatever part of the flight you're doing, but certainly, especially for emergencies, you got to keep your head calm and cool and do the process. And I think that's what we did during COVID, and I think that's how we run our business in general. Is really, just keeping a cool head and making sure that we're not just making impulsive, crazy decisions that you're going to look back on and say, what were we thinking?
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about the values, and when you said whatever it takes, I feel like that, to me, I think of resourcefulness. When you said, know your commitments, right? Or keep your commitments. I
Uh-huh.
think of like keeping your word. I was just wondering whether it be people you've been around at the company or others that you admire and maybe read about. I think we talked about jobs last time. Are there a couple traits or characteristics, one or two, that come to mind that you think, hey, like the people who sustain excellence, like these are a couple of the traits that they strive to have? And if anyone comes to mind, I'd love to hear it.
I think there are little lessons to take from lots of different leaders out there. I make a daily uh, routine of reading the Wall Street Journal, and there are so many great articles in there from talking about different leadership styles of companies and business challenges and how companies fail and how companies succeed. And I think when you look at the commonality of all of them is the commitment and the consistency. I think that's really what it comes down to, because then people understand that there is a steady path that they know to stay the course, and they'll follow you. They'll stick to what the vision is, and they'll keep it going. So whether it's Howard Schultz from Starbucks or Bob Iger from Disney or Elon Musk from Tesla and SpaceX, I mean, there are, or Warren Buffett is an amazing person that is consistent and steady, and just always you know what to expect.
Yeah,
And it's not to say that there aren't new ideas that come up that are pursued and built upon. But I think that steadiness and that consistency, that's also part of that, building that trust. And it provides clarity, because it's when you have an organization that goes beyond just a small group of a handful of people. When you have a company that starts off in this 3 4 5 people, and everybody's sitting in the same room working at their desks, it's easy to you know communicate everything that you want to talk about. But when you get into dozens of people or hundreds of people or even thousands of people, you need to make sure that everybody's walking, singing to the same tune.
that makes sense. Pivoting slightly, but oh, by the way, Bob Iger's, I don't know if you've read his memoir, that Ride of a Lifetime.
Hmm.
I love. I don't have you got a chance to read it? I thought it was
Hmm.
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, just thought of that when you said Bob Iger. Just flipping to your career, who do you feel has made the biggest impact in your career on you, whether it be a mentor or somebody else?
uh I think I would probably have to say my father. It might be a little cliche in a lot of respects, but I really do think my father, because he, I think the sense of integrity that he had, and the sense of building a cohesive team, was a big part of what what I took from him. And also understanding the balance between, getting your point across, but not being so forceful that, you don't want to think for yourself. I think there's a lot to be said for kind of setting some expectations, and then, getting out of the way for the person to move in the direction that they want to move. An example I sometimes give is, tell me that you want me I'm in New York. Tell me you want me in LA at this address at 9 o'clock on Thursday morning. And then, leave me alone and trust that I'll get there. I don't want you to tell me, make sure you leave by this time, and make sure you book your ticket, or make sure you hop in the car starting at this day and time. Just tell me what the result is, and let me handle it from there. And I think that was part of the lesson that I took from my dad, was not getting into those micro weeds. And I've tried to take that lesson and apply it within our company. And the other thing is that he was a real person of honor and integrity. When he bought U.S. Luggage back in 1982, there was a lot of money owed to some suppliers, and it would have been very easy to say, well, sorry, that was the old company and they're defunct now. So, but he made sure to pay everybody. And when I bought Briggs and Riley in 2000, that lesson very much resonated with me. And there was a lot of money owed to people when the company was bought, and every dollar to every person was paid. So, that was an example of a lesson.
I love that. Can you give me just 1 second?
Sure.
Okay. The tablet. My wife is traveling. She's coming back today, so I get a knock on the door. It's my 6-year-old.
No worries. If my dog starts barking, I'll say, I'll apologize as well.
No worries. Mine is sleeping quietly behind me. He's easy though. So I was going to ask you like lessons from your parents. I feel like you've covered that off, and you didn't share that story about your dad last time. So I feel like just getting to know him a little bit better is really cool. Is there any other lesson from your parents that stands out? Maybe on the side of just like fatherhood / parenthood that you carry with you?
I think just giving your kids room to flourish. I think that's really one of the keys, is, manage from a little bit of a distance.
You mentioned earlier that one of your sons is now working in the company, and that had kind of reminded you of the way of when you started working with your dad and at the company. I'm just curious, was there something kind of interesting there that has kind of transpired over the last few months?
Well, I think something that my son has kind of tapped into was something that I also learned when I first got involved in the business. I shared with you last time that, the things that I knew about the company early on was, I worked in the warehouse during the summers, and then I did some computer programming in the front office at times. And what I saw is a business that was, warehousing and people sitting at desks. And he took me on a lengthy trip overseas during college, and I saw a whole different aspect to the business, a much bigger sort of concept of the business than I came to appreciate. And I think what my son has similarly come to realize, and him and I have had, lengthy talks about this. He kind of had a sense like, oh, this is a luggage business. I don't want to make boxes on wheels. And he would go into the office and just see people sitting at desks. And in recent years, we had more, in-depth conversations about how fascinating of a business it really is when you start to look at it a little bit more, with marketing and product design and logistics and manufacturing and sales and finance and the operations. And so it really is a very, very diverse business. And he started 5 months ago, and as he's in the business, he's really seeing a lot of this variation, and he's fascinated by it. And the hardest part sometimes that I have is to tell him, calm down and learn the business before you start making, recommending lots and lots and lots of changes. So what he's doing right now is he's spending about 4 months or so in each of the different departments. So I didn't hire him to do a particular job. He's basically he actually made himself a business card that says intern on it.
That's awesome.
And so that he would have a little business card of his own, and it says intern. And the idea is over the next 2.5 years, he just learns all those different departments really in depth. So right now he's in customer service. If you call and ask for customer service, he may be someone that picks up the phone sometime soon. But he's loving it. He's loving it, and I think he's come to appreciate uh, the diversity and the excitement of the business the way I did
Yeah.
when I went on that trip overseas.
I remember you said like you got to love what you do to be really good at it, and it sounds like the curiosity that he has about the business. And sometimes you just have to mature a little bit, right? When you start working, and if you can strike the balance of the maturity and the interest, and that intersects, that's really cool. I did want to ask you, and you think about, okay, since 2000 that you've bought the company, you have a pretty sizable team at this point. If I asked your team, what kind of leader is Richard, what would you hope that they say about you?
Oh, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. Well, first and foremost, I hope that they would say I'm somebody that they trust and have faith in, that keeps cool under pressure, and provides clear direction and instructions and consistency. So I think those are the things that I would most hope that they would say to me. I keep going back to it, so it's a bit of a broken record, but to me, it's so much about building, consistency, trust, integrity. I think all those things are the foundation. It's like, if you have a house and it's not built on the right foundation, it doesn't matter, whether you use 2x6s or 2x10s or whatever is built on top of that foundation. It's not gonna stand up.
Makes sense. One of the things that I thought was really just interesting about you is that you kind of define yourself as a problem solver, right? You had said that as an engineer and a Virgo, it could be a dangerous combination. I'm wondering sorry, one second. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I get like so hustled by my daughter when like she's like 3 treats, tablets, probably a sugar rush when I get out of here. So I'll restate it for you. So I felt like you identify yourself as a problem solver. You said that as an engineer and a Virgo, it could be a dangerous combination. What I'm curious about, why do you think you have the ability to look at a problem and see it as an opportunity, as something to solve, instead of getting debilitated by it and feeling like you just hit this roadblock and it could frustrate you? Like, why do you think, you've sort of gravitated to have that sort of ability to do that?
I think part of it might just be some people are wired one way versus another way, but I think part of it is also if I think it's a great question. I think if I look at sort of the underpinning of it, maybe some of it has to do with having an optimistic sort of positive outlook on things. So I think when you look at things from a positive, optimistic perspective, you say, okay, how can I deal with this? What can I do to make it to fix it, to make it work, to solve the problem? I think if I was imagining somebody who might be a little less optimistic, taking that approach, or trying to address that issue, they might say, "Oh, there's no solution to this. This is a real problem. There's no way out of this." So I think an underlying part of it is really having a certain amount of optimism and confidence to say we can do this. Now we just have to figure out how.
I know last time we talked about Great by Choice. I finally read Good to Great, just for the
Yeah,
record,
great
and
book.
so good. I listened to
Yeah.
it on Audible, and it just felt like a 3-hour TED talk. It was so good. Probably the best Audible I've ever listened to. And he talks about the was it one of the generals that was captured in Vietnam, and they asked him, I'm just forgetting the terminology of it was almost like a little case study, but they asked him, okay, you're a prisoner of war, all your comrades, like many of them passed away or just kind of lost their minds. And one of the things that he said um, was having just like a healthy optimism of like
Hmm.
an understanding of the current reality, but a healthy optimism that he will find a way. It was the Stockdale paradox, if you
Hmm.
remember that, General
Yeah.
Stockdale. So it just made me think of that. Okay, if we think about like, just think of like since the year 2000 and today, when you think about exciting moments in the company, inflection points or milestones, what are maybe just 2 or 3 of the coolest and proudest moments that you've had at your time at the company so far?
Oh, wow. There's been so many. It's hard to pin a couple of them down. Uh, I think one of the things was setting a stake in the ground early on in the early 2000s, maybe 2, 3 years after buying the company. I had said that our goal was to be the number one brand in specialty luggage stores. So really putting that stake in the ground and giving everybody a rallying cry to say we were a relatively small company back then, certainly in a much bigger specialty luggage channel, uh, almost 30 years ago, and there were some really sizable players that were just dominating that whole channel. But one of the things I said early on was we are going to be the number one brand of the specialty luggage channel. And everybody, pulled out the stops to do and think, what do we have to do to make that happen? And it was from product to customer service to our warranty support, to our marketing initiatives, all the commitments we made marketing wise. And after it took us about 8 years, 8 or 10 years, and we were far and away the number one brand of specialty luggage stores. So I think that was a major accomplishment that I'm proud of, and I think my team just did an awesome job really rallying behind that initiative. And I think that initiative set the stage for us continuing our growth today. And, as specialty luggage stores faded away, and they're still a very important, meaningful part of our business, but they're a much smaller part of our business than we were because so many of them are gone now. They were mom and pop owned, and people retired. You had the 2008 recession, you had COVID, you had 9/11, of course, that knocked a few out. But there's much fewer stores out there now, and the strongest survived. But we learned over the years to stick to who we were, but at the same time learned to adjust so that we could continue to grow. An example would be our own D2C website. And early on, I was very transparent and honest with some of our retailers that said, well, you're selling on your own website. That's not right. You're supposed to be selling only to us, your retailers. And I said, listen, there are some people who want to buy online, and that's our one virtual brand presentation in our one brand store, as opposed to a lot of our competitors who had many, many dozens and dozens of brick and mortar stores under their own name. And I said, we're not opening brick and mortar stores. That's not who we are. That's not sticking to our knitting. But virtually, we had this one store, and we promised them, and they, half believed us at the time. But we promised them that we won't do anything on our website that we're not doing in their stores. And they've come to really believe that because we've been very disciplined about it. So I'm talking about, for example, pricing. We don't run promos or anything like that on our website, just like we don't run promos in the stores. And if we're closing something out, we let our retailers know, and we let them do a % off at the same time that we do a % off on our website on those same limited number of discontinued items. So we've adjusted and ebbed and flowed along the way and been very transparent with our retailers. And I think those things have allowed us to be very much embraced by the specialty retailers even today. But at the same time, we sell direct to consumer.
That makes sense. When did the lifetime guarantee, is that common in the industry, or is that unique to you guys?
The way we do it is very unique to us. Other people throw around the terminology lifetime guarantee. But if you start reading their fine print, you start to recognize the differences. So you'll have people who say lifetime guarantee against manufacturing defects.
Oh, okay.
Well, our lifetime guarantee is if something is broken on it, you send it in and we'll fix it, no charge. The only thing you're responsible for is the cost to actually get it to our place, to our repair centers. But that's it. So as far as I have ever seen, we're the only ones in our industry that have that level of warranty. And I don't even know too many other companies out there in general that have a warranty like that.
Yeah.
There's a few here and there, but we will literally continue to fix a bag, and it may not be pretty after a while, but it will function. We will make sure that bag functions.
Yeah. I actually, like 5-6 years ago, sent in my carry-on, and I shipped it off, and it came back and it was fixed. It was a unique thing because back then when you have the specialty retailers, to give them the confidence that they can, the salesperson or whoever it is can recommend something that, you've empowered them and they can communicate to the customer. Like, you don't have to worry if something falls apart, they'll fix it. If you're going to spend a decent amount of money on it, you'll almost think of it as an investment. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing to provide.
Yeah. And our retailers understand it. We use the phrase sometimes, simple as that. If something breaks, we'll fix it. Simple as that.
Yeah.
You don't have to show a receipt. You don't have to explain what happened. If you cat peed in the bag, send us the bag, and we'll figure out how to, maybe we'll replace the lining or whatever might need to be done to make that bag um, function again. So we keep it simple as that.
Yeah. What about when you think of, and I'm sure you agree that we learn more through setbacks or failures, but when you think about maybe an inflection point when there was a learning lesson over the last couple decades, what's one that comes to mind?
Well, probably the one that really jumps out is COVID. Learning how to get through that whole process, and sticking by our retailers and sticking by our employees. Uh, those are things that uh, we continue to this day to stick to. So during COVID, I would say that was certainly an inflection point. There were a lot of companies out there getting desperate with, whether it's promotions or slash and burn and cutting their staff. We actually have more people supporting the retail trade now out in the field than we had prior to COVID. There are less retailers out there in terms of specialty luggage stores, but we sell better department stores, and we sell other types of retailers now. And it's more important than ever that we can service those retailers and train the staff and train the sales associates and make sure that we have visual merchandising in those stores. So we really made sure during COVID that we kept steady, smart and steady all throughout.
Oh, that's really good to hear. It's interesting. It's such a unique industry to learn those types of things. I'm also wondering, just I know I want to talk about like your travels a little bit. Where do you fly to? I'm wondering, and like, what are you flying? Because you mentioned you fly small planes. Where do you go typically?
So the small plane I fly has a range of about 1,100 miles.
Okay.
So typically, if I'm flying myself, it'll be someplace that's generally in that range. I don't really love to drag it out too much to make fuel stops and things.
Okay.
So it might be Florida, Chicago, St. Louis. We have a good friend in St. Louis. My sister's in Chicago. We have a house down in Florida. Um, so yeah, any place that any when you love flying, any excuse you have to fly somewhere, even if it's for the proverbial $100 hamburger, as they
Yeah.
as they say in aviation, which with the price of fuel now, it's a little more than $100 to fly to get a hamburger. But yeah, those would be places that I would fly to on a pretty regular basis. And then there's two organizations that I'm part of that I'm very proud of. I was actually supposed to fly somebody on this past Tuesday, but it's called Angel Flight and PALS, Patient Airlift Services. So they're people they're not ambulatory, so they can get in and out of the airplane, and they're not um, you know, uh, in jeopardy of medical problems during the flight, but they need to fly very often to get medical treatment. Otherwise, they would have to drive 6, 7, 8 hours to go for a 30-minute chemo treatment or some type of treatment. So these organizations get volunteer pilots to fly people, patients, to their doctors, to their appointments, and things like that. So that's another area that I'll fly people several times a year.
Wow, that's really cool. Never heard of that. There's this quote that I picked up. And I think when I think of this quote, I think of travel or doing things that are fun, like some of them, like you described. And the quote is, monotony collapses time, novelty unfolds it. And I used to like never take vacations, it seemed like. And when one of my friends, my coworkers would tell me, like, you need to set the next one. You need to set the next one. It's an anchor in time. And I always think of that: monotony collapses time, novelty unfolds it. And for someone that's creating the vehicle for people to travel, I imagine travel plays a significant role in your life, in your family's life. And you try to, I'm sure you tell the kids, like, you've got to, you know, make the time to take a trip, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think COVID certainly gave people an extreme appreciation of how important it is to explore and uh, learn about the world and get outside the bubble of your own home or your own community. And travel is to me, it breaks down all of the barriers between different peoples and different cultures. When you have this impression of a certain culture, and then when you go there and you see that these people are just people like you and me, and they want to do good and they care about each other and they want to treat people nicely and they're proud of their country or their city. Uh, I think it starts to break down those silos of different cultures and different countries. I think of John Lennon's song "Imagine," right? I mean, those words run through probably many of our heads very often. Imagine there's no countries and things like that. Well, when you travel, you do get to break down some of those preconceptions of the borders and the countries and things that divide us as opposed to things that bring us together.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of those things that will leave an impression on you more than anything you do with your time, which is really cool. Um, I know last time we talked, you mentioned a buddy of yours who likes to pack your luggage with anchor chains for him to check in. But I'm curious, for maybe someone you don't know, is there a story that sort of, if you could share only one story with your grandchildren about maybe an email that came in from someone you didn't know or someone you met at the airport, what would that story be that you're really proud of?
Oh, I well, I mean, there was a friend who I don't know that this is like the be all end all of a story, but I'm trying to think of something on the spot. But I do have a friend of mine who uh, we've been friends now for about a year or so, and he was he just reached out to me and said he needs some Briggs and Riley, and I said, okay, no problem. What is there some kind of urgency? He said, I landed at JetBlue in Orlando, and if you've ever been to JetBlue's new terminal in Orlando, they ran out of money apparently to install moving sidewalks. And the length of the terminal is literally from the last gate is almost a mile long. I'm not exaggerating. It's at least a 20-minute walk from the last gate to get to the baggage claim. He was telling me, and he's a big guy, he was telling me how his carry-on bag, just as he got off the airplane and he pulled up the handle, it came out in his hand.
Oh
And this
no.
was an old bag that he found in his attic because he doesn't travel all that often. He said he had to walk through the entire terminal from the last gate. It was about 11:30 at night when he came in, and he was tired from a business trip during the day that he had to go on, and he was carrying the luggage like a baby, this 30-pound or so carry-on luggage for almost a mile from the last JetBlue gate in Orlando Airport. And he said, that's why I need a piece of Briggs and Riley luggage.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I just thought that was so funny.
I imagine if one he had in the attic, it probably didn't have like wheels that he could just slide it, right? He literally had to carry.
Well, the fact that he's a big guy, he's like 6'5". He said he couldn't hold the little carry handle that's attached to the luggage to just kind of hunch down
Yeah.
and drag it on the two wheels. And I'm not going to say what brand it was. It wasn't a Briggs bag, obviously, but he said, I'm getting a Briggs bag. I don't care if I travel, once every 3 years. I'm never going through that again.
Yeah, that's awesome. Richard, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you investing the time. I feel like you've given me enough not to screw it up from here. Appreciate you just leaning into this too. Is there anything you feel like we missed? I just want to be mindful of time.
No, I enjoyed the conversation. I really did. I appreciate the chance to hear from you and get some of your insights and to share some of what I'm proud of with Briggs and Riley. So
Likewise. Well, I love what you guys are doing, obviously. And if you're ever flying into Portland, let me know.
yeah, and if you're ever in this area, let me know and
Yeah.
I'll hop over and get the hamburger with you.
Sounds good. Are you in New York or New Jersey? I forget.
Long Island, New York. Okay. All right. Well, please let me know. I'd love to get together.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks, Richard. Have a good one.
All right.
Thanks,
Take
Brittany.
care, Omid.
I'll be in touch with you over
Sounds
email.
okay. Perfect. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.